We created the greatest economy in the history of our country.
Well, first of all, let's put this in perspective.
The unemployment numbers for African Americans, for Asian Americans, for Hispanic Americans, virtually every number was the best.
Inflation rate month to month was just an inch.
We had the best stock market price ever.
I got that, but guess what we are? We're in a position where for the last several months it hasn't spiked.
You know what? She deleted 33,000 emails.
How that could possibly happen. How anyone could be that irresponsible. And I thought, what data was in there that may compromise sources and methods? By that I mean names of people who helped, or et cetera. And it's just totally irresponsible.
I think it's disgraceful what she's done.
I mean, honest to God, that's all I think.
The biggest scandal was when they spied on my campaign.
I haven't, look.
They spied on my campaign, they got caught.
Don't.
And then they went much further than that, and they got caught.
Yes.
It was our Justice Department.
Yes.
It was Obama and Biden.
It's wrong.
It's wrong.
It's wrong. So wrong.
I think what happened was disgraceful. Should never have happened.
Think about that.
Should never have happened.
Think of how that has changed everything.
What kind of ice cream? What flavor ice cream do you have?
You think I would tell you if I knew exactly what it would be? Of course I'm not going to tell you.
You just come in here with that negative attitude.
And it's much too early to make that kind of decision.
And when I finish, this country will be in a position like it hasn't been maybe ever.
I'm more optimistic than I've been in a long time.
Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed.
So we gonna go live then?
On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you. Welcome back, Wolfpack. Dire Wolf here for our weekly news recap from behind enemy lines on YouTube, where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized. Alongside me is my co-host and producer, Fox Trevize. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty excited for a little early today.
Well, we got to be early because we have a fuck ton of stuff written down that we are... It'd be a miracle if we get to
just because we're early doesn't mean we won't last a long time.
That's something my wife likes about me, though. So let's go on. So, as always, have a great show. We have a great show for you tonight. But first, we have to thank our sponsors. This show is only possible because of viewers like you. We would especially like to thank those who donate to us financially, including Kaylet, who I was speaking to on Twitter just a little bit ago, Ori Main, Nathan Cameron, Tetris Freak, Slowpoke, Thunder Erican, who is female, The White Lion, who is a lion, and... Thanks for that. Timberwolf, who is a wolf, and the White Wolf. Money isn't the only way you can give to us, though. We really appreciate it when you subscribe to us on DLive, Twitch, YouTube. Especially, though, please follow us on Rumble.
And also, thank you, Jackie. Is Jackie here today?
Oh, yeah, is Jackie here? Can Jackie please stand up? Can the real Jackie please stand up?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
What? What's wrong with Jackie? Why is Jackie not here?
I forgot. Oh, no.
Is there something wrong with Jackie? Is she okay?
Yes, there's something wrong with Jackie. All right. Well, ready for another funny video? We had a few.
Yes.
There's a lot of funny videos this week, and there was also a lot of, World War III and, the end of the world stuff this week. So we're going to start off with the good stuff.
Yeah, we're starting with something that will make you happy. Then we're going to crush your soul.
Yeah. Let's see here. So there was this fun video put out this week. The FBI agent who, I think we talked about this last week. They raided Mike Lindell, famous MyPillow guy. And the FBI agents inspired the FBI agents that raided Mike Lindell's house. They were inspired by all of the whistleblowers, and so they came out this week and they had this to say about their involvement in raiding Mike Lindell's house.
I'm FBI Special Agent Hetfield. We recently raided founder and CEO of MyPillow, Mike Lindell. We expected to find evidence of election tampering, fraud, support for Trump, which, as you know, is highly illegal. We didn't find any of that, though. What we did find good night's sleep. I gotta say, politics aside, these pillows that we confiscated from Mike Lindell are the most comfortable, nicest pillows that I've ever slept on. I mean, all the guys in the office can't stop talking about how comfortable and soft they really are. Before we rated Mike Lindell as a political stunt, I was using a competitor's pillow. It was not a good pillow.
I can't sleep. How can I sleep knowing I'm just a political arm of the Biden administration?
But now, after a long day rating Biden's political opponents, investigating concerned parents at school board meetings, and egging on disturbed young men to commit acts of terror, I can finally catch a few Z's with MyPillow's patented adjustable fill stay cool technology and fluffy design that will not go flat, no matter how many Trump supporters I beat with it.
Where were you on January 6th? Scum! You want me to do it again? I'll hit you again! Is that what you want? Go ahead! It's so comfortable.
MyPillow, the official pillow of the FBI.
Well, that was fun.
I think we talked about that story 2 shows ago, and I'm glad that Mike Lindell has such a good sense of humor about it.
Yes. Also funny, and I guess, I don't know, potentially good news depending on how you look at it. Well, let's just let Kamala Harris tell you herself.
So the United States shares a very important relationship, which is an alliance with the Republic of North Korea.
Whoa. This is huge news.
Breaking. Apparently, Kamala Harris this week announced an alliance with North Korea. I mean, that's pretty crazy.
Gosh, she brokered an alliance with one of the most insane adversaries we have.
You know, I thought that this was just a political stunt for her to continue her efforts in being literally anywhere but the southern border, which is her job, by going to the TMZ. But I was wrong. I mean, yeah, I would like it if, 250,000 illegal immigrants a month would stop flooding the border. But I mean, gosh, peace with North Korea is, an alliance, a strong alliance at that with North Korea. I mean, that's a pretty good consolation prize, don't you think, Tyre?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we've been too hard on her.
We have.
I mean, we may have given the impression over the last, year or two that she is completely useless and incompetent in every possible way, but now we can see it. Trump didn't broker an alliance with North Korea.
That's true. I mean, he stepped over the line, but Kamala Harris rewrote the line.
Yeah.
Maybe she's right. Maybe not only were we wrong about her being incompetent, maybe we were wrong about some other stuff too. She could be correct about the patriarchy, because Dyer, I'm telling you, if a man had struck this peace deal with North Korea, everyone would be talking about it. But Kamala Harris, a woman who's either Indian or black or Jamaican or both or all four, she, and a woman, did I mention, she brokers a peace deal with North Korea, and no one talks about it. Not only is no one talking about it, the media is trying to cover it up, and the White House is trying to walk it back. They just will not let her break that glass ceiling.
The White House actually is amending the official transcript, so it looks as though she didn't actually do this great feat of diplomacy and trying to discredit her, great accomplishments. I'm starting to wonder what else we've been wrong about, because, like you said, obviously there may actually be a patriarchy, since she has done one of the most notable things in foreign relations in a long time, most meaningful one in a while since Trump's peace deals, and it might even outweigh Trump's peace deals, and no one's talking about it. And if she was wrong, if she was right about this, what have we been wrong about? Or there's a counter possibility, and I know this is a very, very unlikely case, but what if Kamala Harris just had one of her, gaffes that she's well known for and mistakenly said the wrong country? That's not likely, though, right?
That sounds sexist. Maybe racist.
I don't even want to imply it, because I don't want to, be sexist or racist.
Yeah, I think that she's a strong, powerful woman, and that we should, adore her for her efforts. And
she clearly knows the difference between North and the South, right?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, wouldn't that be silly if she didn't know the difference between North and South Korea? I mean, gosh, are you suggesting that her incompetence is at the level where she doesn't know that one of them is our greatest ally economically and politically, and the other is the exact opposite of that? She couldn't possibly have mixed those two up, right?
Yeah, it's not like she just read random letters and combinations on a script that she was trying to speak. She actually read the script. She would have to have read the script incorrectly and added in a word that wasn't there.
So, I think we need to just stow any of this conversation that she's incompetent, and I think we need to applaud her for her peace deal that she struck.
Yes, good job, Kamala Harris.
Wonderful.
You found one thing you could do well.
So brave, so beautiful.
Yep.
Somebody who's not brave and beautiful is this guy, John Fetterman, who we haven't talked a lot about.
Did you point?
Mostly because I don't care, and it's kind of like, I don't know, if we talk about him, we have to talk about, Dr. Oz really should win the race in Pennsylvania. He really deserves to beat Fetterman. When, I don't know, I kind of just think that maybe we should just forego Pennsylvania representation for a few years.
I think if there's a question of whether or not Dr. Oz or Fetterman should be the representative of the state, I think you've already lost.
Yes. I think,
and that it's an absurd question in the first place.
I think Pennsylvania just gets to vote present for a few years, and that's it.
Yeah.
Either way, there's been a lot of debate about debates and whether or not John Fetterman should participate in one. And while he has not yet agreed to participate in a debate with Dr. Oz in a reasonable amount of time, he has entered into the fray with his fellow Democrat, challengers or whatever you call them. And here was the results of that. We'll let you watch.
The question is, did you point a 20-gauge shotgun at the chest of a black man, and you have an opportunity with all of Pennsylvania watching to say, I'm sorry. Are you going to say I'm sorry today, John?
That never happened.
So you're not going to say I'm sorry?
That never happened.
So you still refuse to say I'm sorry to this day?
I'm the only Democrat that successfully confronted
You're the only
gun
Democrat
violence.
who used a shotgun to chase down an unarmed black man.
And I believe that was from before his stroke. And so even with full mental faculties, absolutely getting savaged. And that probably explains why he did not want to enter into a debate with Dr. Oz.
Yeah, when he has his full mental faculties and he doesn't have brain damage, he apparently points shotguns at black people. I was unaware of this. Hopefully it's not a trend for him. But I mean, it's got to be something easily proven, right? They're both saying the opposite of that story, right? So I'm sure there is the truth that's easily provable.
Well, truth is a fickle thing, as well. Don Lemon's about to find out here, and our next fun video here.
Oh, this is great.
Yes, Don Lemon would probably much rather have a 12-gauge pointed at him.
Well, this is coming when, there's all of this wealth, and you hear about it comes as England is facing rising costs of living, a living crisis, austerity budget cuts, and so on. And then you have those who are asking for reparations for colonialism, and they're wondering, $100 billion, $24 billion here and there, $500 million there. Some people want to be paid back, and members of the public are wondering, why are we suffering when you are... you have all of this vast wealth. Those are legitimate concerns.
Well, I think you're right about reparations in terms of if people want it, though, what they need to do is you always need to go back to the beginning of a supply chain. Where was the beginning of the supply chain? That was in Africa. And when across the entire world, when the slavery was taking place, which was the first nation in the world that abolished slavery? The first nation in the world to abolish it. It was started by William Wilberforce, was the British. In Great Britain, they abolished slavery. 2,000 naval men died on the high seas trying to stop slavery. Why? Because the African kings were rounding up their own people. They had them on cages waiting in the beaches. No one was running into Africa to get them. And I think you're totally right. If reparations need to be paid, we need to go right back to the beginning of that supply chain and say who was rounding up their own people and having them handcuffed in cages. Absolutely. That's where they should start. And maybe, I don't know, the descendants of those families where they died in the high seas trying to stop the slavery, that those families should receive something too, I think, at the same time.
That's right. Africa.
It's an interesting discussion.
Should pay reparations to white sailors. All right, white British sailors.
Yeah,
and their families.
Don, that's an interesting discussion. Yeah. And as far as America goes, there was a political ideology that wanted slavery, and there was a political ideology that fought a war against it. And I think that I do understand that's a long time ago. Nobody who was alive then still alive today, and even with the genetic lineage, you're talking about 2 or 3 generations at the smallest amount. Some many more generations removed. And I think that if anybody's paying reparations, it should probably be the political party, which can directly trace its roots to that time.
And the political party that is the only one that currently has held slaves or has had members that's held slaves recently and still supports policies that enslave people.
And as we'll see later, even as recently as this week, is encouraging a certain group of racial individuals to go pick their crops.
Yep.
Alrighty.
Yeah, so moving on.
That was fun. We have some more fun clips, although these fun clips are different than the previous fun clips, as in because they are an actual story. So our first story
A1.
Yes, our story A1 is that Joe Biden is apparently seeing dead people.
That's not a good sign. Like, he might be joining him soon.
Yeah, he's a little close to the veil. He might be on the other side. This is the thing that happens when you use the dark arts to keep your life going for longer. I'm guessing it's the reduction in baby slaughter because of the abortion bills.
Yeah, I mean, they're keeping him alive by injecting him with baby stem cells, right?
Yeah, and if you don't keep those injections up, if you don't keep those baby cell boosters going, you start to see dead people. So,
yeah.
Here is Joe Biden.
And I want to thank all of you here, for including bipartisan elected officials like Representative Governor, Senator Braun, Senator Booker, Representative Jackie. Are you here? Where's Jackie? I didn't think she was going to be here to help make this a reality.
Yeah, so this was Joe Biden earlier this week at a conference about a bill that's supposed to end hunger or something. I don't know. There's been a lot of bills that are supposed to end hunger, and they never really work. Either way, as Joe said, he wasn't sure if Jackie was supposed to be there because Jackie died last month. Jackie was I believe a Republican even. Let's see here, Wolarski. I believe she was a Republican senator or congressperson, and she worked very hard on this bill. I guess that was kind of like her key legislation, was working on this hunger bill. And she was unfortunately in a car accident that killed her and several of her staffers, I believe a month and a half ago. And so she's, dead. And so, yeah, I don't think that she was planning on being there, Joe. Even though Joe's looking around for her. Joe gave a statement at the time that she died a few weeks ago. And so he was well aware that she was no longer with us, and also part of this event about this bill that Jackie had worked so hard on was also going to be paying tribute to her life, probably within 30 minutes after Joe was speaking.
Also, he had signed the order to have the flags flown at half-mast in her honor.
Yeah, so Joe, not remembering that this congressperson died. The White House, they had a quick response to try to cover this up, because obviously, Dyer, you probably think that this would be indicative of Joe's mental decline, right?
Yeah, you would think that if he's not even aware of the events happening at the event he's at, the things that are going on there, that it might imply that he's not all aware of what's going on, right? He's not aware that the person who put on the event is dead, and there was a big deal about them not being able to be there. And he doesn't remember that, and it calls out to him that it might imply some mental decline.
Yeah, I mean, and we've all dealt with elderly people, family members mostly, who, towards the end of their life, as their mental faculties are declining, they will sometimes forget that people have died, or they'll forget how old people are. And it's always sad, but it's a thing. It's well understood phenomenon. I'm sure everybody is at least familiar, if it hasn't happened to you, at least familiar with that happening. That a grandparent may be looking around for somebody who's no longer with us, or referencing them as though they were there. But again, not a weird thing. It's just a thing that happens to people with dementia when they're old. So the White House, Jean Perry had the unenviable position of trying to, spin this so that, it didn't look like Joe was in rapid mental decline. And here was her attempt at that.
Final one. What happened in the hunger event today? The president appeared to look around the room for an audience member, a member of Congress who passed away last month. He seemed to indicate she might be in the room. What happened?
So the president was, as you all know, you guys were watching today's event, a very important event on food insecurity. The president was naming the congressional champions on this issue and was acknowledging her incredible work. He had already planned to welcome the Congresswoman's family to the White House on Friday. There will be a bill signing in her honor this coming Friday. So, of course, she was on his mind. She was of top of mind for the president. He very much looks forward to discussing her remarkable legacy of public service with them when he sees her family this coming Friday.
He said, "Jackie, are you here? Where's Jackie? She must not be here."
No, I totally understand. I just explained she was on top of mind. This wasn't what we were able to witness today, and what the president was able to lift up in this at this conference, at this event, was how her focus on wanting to.
I get that Karen has a hard job, but she's terrible at it.
He said, "Jackie, are you here? Where is Jackie? She must not be here." That was savage.
Yeah, and so I hope when he was supposed to speak with the family of the dead congressperson, that he's going to speak to them like knowing that she's dead, and not asking where she is.
Jeez, goodness. Well, unfortunately for Harry Jean, did not stop there. The fun just keeps going.
I have to do this, but I'm compelled to ask you to go one more time back to the question about Congresswoman Walorski.
I'm not sure why. Why one more time?
Frankly, honestly, I think the memory of the Congresswoman and history requires some clarity here. Can you explain where the mistake was made? Was the president confused? Was something written in the teleprompter that he didn't recognize? Can you just help us understand what happened?
I mean, you're jumping to a lot of conclusions. No, but you're. But I hear you, Stephen. I'm answering the question.
He's not jumping to conclusions. He's actually trying to serve up on a silver platter excuses that the White House might be able to use. The media is just so desperate. Like, come on, guys, just give us we will believe any lie. Here's a selection of good lies. We'll help you come up with them. Please, for the love of God, say something that makes sense. Please.
Because she's terrible at her job.
Yeah, she is.
Jumping to a lot of conclusions. I just answered the question. If that had been the case, I would have stated that, right? I would clearly have stated what you just laid out. What I had said is that she was on top of mind.
She was on top of mind, a phrase that, people use regularly. And if you thought that it stopped there, it didn't.
I wanted to return to this question of the Congresswoman, and I think we all totally get why she's top of mind. You've made that case pretty effectively. But I think the confusing part is why, if she and the family is top of mind, does the president think that she's living and in the room?
I don't find that confusing. I mean, I think many people can speak to sometimes when you have someone top of mind, they're a top of mind, exactly that. And it is also, if you put it into the context, it's not like it happened outside of context, right? It happened at an event where we were calling out the champions, congressional champions in particular, of this issue. This important issue when it comes to food insecurity, something that this administration has led on from the beginning of this administration, not just across the country, but also globally. You heard him talk about food insecurity last week at the UN and the investments that we have put forward as the United States of America in helping deal with that. Look, he was at an event, you all saw, you all watched, which is why you're asking the question, right, where he was calling out, again, congressional leaders, a bipartisan leadership that we have seen on this particular issue. And again, he's going to see her family in just 2 days. And she was on top of mind. I mean, that is not an unusual scenario there.
And man, I was hoping it wouldn't cut it off there, because the remainder of that clip, which unfortunately I don't have queued up here, I'm gonna be able to find it later, is the reporter says, I like John Lennon. I think about John Lennon every day. He's on top of mind for me, but I never get confused and think that John Lennon's going to be in the room somewhere. And I'm very sad that got cut off. If somebody in chat wants to send that to me, I would appreciate it. And then here is towards the end of the press conference where the fun just keeps on going.
Okay, go ahead. These
moments of confusion are happening with the constituents.
Excuse me,
Americans are watching this and are having concerns. What do you say to that? This is a legitimate question. We need to have some answers.
These moments keep happening. We deserve answers. Yeah, we do. We do.
Yep.
So
she's so tired of this shit.
Yeah. So
she's been over her head. Yeah.
So top of mind is it's a new phrase for a lot of people, or it's a phrase unearthed and is now part of the popular lexicon due to this event. So what does top of mind mean? It doesn't really sound like it sounds a little bit like jargony or not quite correct English, and I believe that she wasn't quite using it in the noun-verb relationship that she was supposed to be, why it sounded a little bit awkward off the tongue. But just for you guys, the phrase top of mind is actually a marketing term that's related to brand perception management. It just means the first thing that comes to mind when you associate a word or a product with a problem. It's basically word association. So for instance, I say runny nose, you probably think Kleenex. I say photocopy, you probably think Xerox. I say dire, you probably think wolf. Personally, I think dork. It's just like whatever the first word that comes to mind is top of mind. Like the word that comes to you first is the word that you have on top of mind for that particular category of thing. So for Joe, this bill that Jackie Walorski worked so hard to champion during her life, she's the first thing that comes to mind. She's the first association, the thing that's top of mind when he thinks of that bill. And that's okay. That's probably accurate. She should be the first person that you think of when you think of that bill because she put so much time into it. The problem is not that she was top of mind for, when you think of that bill. The problem is that Joe's mind is broken. The key thinking systems that people without dementia use are missing from Joe. For instance, Joe's instant association of Jackie with the bill is understandable and correct, but his memory should have also kicked in the context that she is no longer with us. If Joe's mind, that's key, right? So yes, instant association, and then you need the context. Gene Perry said something about context, and I think the context that she's dead is probably some important context that was missing.
So if you had a runny nose and the first thing that pops in your mind is Kleenex, but the Kleenex company had closed down, there no longer was any Kleenex, you might also at the same time think, damn, but I can't have any because they're all gone.
Correct. Or you may think that Kleenex is in the room with you right now. as I often do.
Where are they?
So if Joe's mind was functioning correctly, and he not only made the instant association with Jackie, but also had the context from his memory that she was no longer with us, then instead of saying, Jackie, is she here? Jackie, where are you? Oh, she must not be here. Instead of saying that, maybe Joe could have said, yeah, it's just impossible to think about this bill without thinking of Jackie. It's difficult for us all that she isn't here to see the results of the project she put so much effort into herself. I keep wishing she was here to see it. And in a way, she is. She will live on in this bill and in the people that it helps. That will be her legacy. See, that sounded so much better.
Yeah, you'd be a much better speechwriter than whoever wrote his speech. Not that, he probably wasn't reading his speech at the time. But regardless, you would probably have done a much better job than his speechwriter.
Yeah. So there, I can have Jackie at top of mind and also maintain the correct context that she's dead. Not that hard. Also, I don't have dementia, so that's probably.
This is also not the first time that Biden has thought someone that was dead was alive. I just want to point that out. He's told a lot of stories about people he thought were still alive that weren't. And because they weren't congressperson and wasn't an event that they were putting on, it was less noticeable and less notable. But he does this all the fucking time.
Yes.
Okay, next story. I think we're moving on to story A1.
Yes. Alrighty. So, war.
What is it good for?
Well, apparently blowing up pipes. All right. So, you guys may have heard that there was a pipeline between Russia and Germany that was mysteriously got a hole in it, and then it got another hole in it, and then I believe it has a third hole in it now.
It has 3 holes in it, yes.
It has 3 holes in it. Just like Gene Perry's explanation of why Joe Biden was looking for Jackie. So there's some discussion as to who done it. A lot of possible suspects, and I guess Dyer and I are going to play a little bit of Clue today. We already know that it was in the Baltic Sea with the pipeline. We just got to figure out who done it. So I totally improv that one. Alrighty.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah. So the mainstream media has put up their guess for it. They think that it was Putin with the pipeline in the Baltic. But they're saying that without any evidence.
Or investigation. They're just saying that Putin did it, which means clearly that is probably not the truth, because we're so used to the mainstream media lying to us. For them to, and with doing so with zero evidence, we just naturally should just not believe the first thing they say and wait a few months for the truth to come out.
Well, it might not be that they're lying. It might just be that Putin's top of mind.
Well, so Forbes, for instance, there's many articles. I decided it wasn't really worth listing all of the articles. It's basically all the mainstream media was saying Putin did it. But they all had very similar reasoning. Forbes' article said, well, it's because they lied about the nuclear disaster, right? They previously tried to hide damage to what was Chernobyl, right? Okay, so just because a long time ago they tried to cover up the Chernobyl event does not mean now they bombed their own pipeline. And then
also,
they said, well,
I think it's important context that the U.S. has also lied sometimes to get us into large wars,
right?
Like the Gulf of Tonkin incident or
WMDs
or.
If you want to set the precedent that once a country lies once in history, that every time they say something moving forward, it is automatically a lie, though you'd probably be right more often than not, is not a precedent that the U.S. government wants to set. The rest of the reasoning we'll get into, but basically they don't have any evidence. They haven't done a investigation, and the people who actually know and have the ability to surveil the area have not released their evidence.
Well, and part of the issue here is a little bit conspiratorial, though just because it's conspiracy doesn't mean it didn't happen, is that if, for instance, let's just say NATO did it, or a NATO allied country did it.
Conspiracy theorist.
Conspiracy theory. Well, who's patrolling the waters, and who would be most able to investigate such a thing?
Oh, I have that answer.
It would be the exact same people who also had the ability to do it. So they might not be the most reliable source, as as the saying goes. Do you want to play this video?
Sure.
All right, let's play this video.
America is fully prepared with all NATO.
Well, that's not what this video was supposed to be about, but yeah.
No. This is Biden saying that he's prepared to respond if Russia takes any NATO territory.
No, this is Joe Biden attempting to say the word prepared. We are prepared.
And
America is fully prepared with our NATO allies to defend every single inch of NATO territory. Every single inch. So, Mr. Putin, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. She also asked me earlier about the pipeline, and let me say this. It was a deliberate act of sabotage, and now the Russians are pumping out disinformation and lies. We're going to work with our allies to get to the bottom of precisely what happened. And at my direction, I've already begun to help our allies enhance the protection of this critical infrastructure. And at the appropriate moment when things calm down, we're going to be sending divers down to find out exactly what happened. We don't know that yet exactly, but we're not, just don't listen to what Putin is saying. What he's saying.
Do you see what he just did? Do you see that he left himself an opening for later on admitting, if caught, that it was the U.S.? He said it was a deliberate act of sabotage, didn't accuse Russia, said that Russia is lying about it. So I think that was he had to read it from a note, by the way. The fact that he could just say that thing.
Tonight on Piers Morgan Uncensored, one of the most fascinating and controversial polemicists on the planet. Dr. Jordan Peterson's books became overnight hits. Millions.
I didn't even know where that was coming from.
God, that guy's voice. So I think it's notable that he left room for being discovered later on. So what is Nord Stream? We're talking about the pipeline. What is this thing?
Well, it brings overpriced sweater jackets and purses and
not Nordstrom.
Oh,
Nord Stream.
Oh, good. I'm glad that you wrote the notes here because I prepared for the wrong thing. Okay, so the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipeline are a pair of underwater natural gas pipelines into Europe that run under the Baltic Sea from Russia to Germany, a picture of which I have up on the screen. Let's see here. So there are 2 additional pipelines coming from Russia to Germany over land. The Yamal pipeline that passed through Poland has already been shut down. The Nord Stream pipelines, both 1 and 2, were also turned off. Putin did this to put pressure on NATO to stop supporting Ukraine. So these were already being turned off, as you may remember. Germany is probably going to be facing a pretty cold winter because they suck. But there was a lot of discussion about the type of leverage that this allowed Russia to have over Germany and Europe and NATO politics in general. And so now Russia doesn't really have that leverage. Whether it was Russia that decided that they didn't want the leverage or it was us is up for debate.
Yes. So Germany actually has been kind of reticent to oppose Russia and to give any lethal aid to Ukraine. You may remember the story where they...
I think Germany is just reticent to freeze to death this winter, but
yes, well, that's why is because Russia had Germany by the balls. That's why there was those stories about Germany providing just helmets early on, right? Instead of actually providing munitions and weapons, Germany stood out as being the only country of note that was only providing non-lethal aid, for which they received a lot of crap. And this is not an endorsement that lethal aid need to be sent. I'm just saying that that's what they're getting crap for. And it's because Russia had them by the balls. So that is... It's been effective because really, because they're so dependent on Russia, countries like Germany really are likely to lose a lot of their citizens to a lack of energy for heating and cooling.
Yeah, I mind you, not the reason why this is an issue is because of Germany and Europe generally shutting down their nuclear power plants, not investing in the fusion research that the US and Europe were once pioneering and now no longer, and trying to convert their grid over to green energy by not only shutting down your advanced nuclear power plants, but also shutting down your more run-of-the-mill coal and natural gas plants in a country that is very cold, that does not have sun for half of the year. So this is directly a result of green energy. These people were probably destined to have chilly existences for the next couple of decades, possibly freezing to death over the course of the next decade. But now, because of this war, because Russia has turned off the gas that Germany was using to backstop its green energy policy, well, now all of that's going to happen all at once.
God, would it be terrible for you to be one of the people who dies from freezing to death during global warming?
Yeah. Though less terrible when you realize that they're German.
Yeah.
So
who would gain from the pipeline being destroyed? That's the important question here, right? So the U.S. and NATO members benefit by removing Putin's influence over NATO members. So the U.S. government has been trying to negotiate with Germany to stop buying fuel from Russia and to buy from other sources. Other NATO members have been doing the same, but they've been buying anyways. So Germany's been not doing, Germany and other countries in NATO have not been doing what we wanted. They've been continuing to buy fuel and kowtow to Putin and fund his war in Ukraine. And America and other NATO nations were not happy about that. So the U.S. and other members of NATO would benefit by Putin no longer having the ability to hold this over Germany, to try to use this to manipulate them and other countries.
I think this also benefits China because they can continue to have guaranteed supply from Russia. Not that Russia's hurting for supply, but China probably wouldn't mind continuing to purchase their extra surplus at a discount, of course. And China also doesn't mind if Europe freezes to death.
Well, if China is the only customer or one of very few customers, they're likely to get a better price than if they were having to compete with Europe.
Yes, that's true.
So Putin loses his pipeline and his bargaining power he's using to try to stop NATO from doing things that they don't want, NATO and Germany. So why would Putin destroy the pipeline? It required many years and $10 billion to construct, and it was owned by the power company owned by the Russian government.
Gazprom?
Gazprom, yeah. He could just turn, and he could and did, if he wanted just to put the screws to Germany, he could just turn off the tap, which is what he did because both Nord Stream 1 and 2 were already turned off. There was gas in the pipes, but they weren't running through to Germany.
Now, running with the so we'll play both sides here, but running with the assumption for the moment that Putin did it, another possible idea would be that he is very concerned about the deep schisms now forming in Russia. And, it's not like it's unprecedented for Russia to have a revolution. Certainly not. And he might be worried that, well, if there's an option to turn the pipelines back on, perhaps Western influences might support the revolution in Russia, might support one of his opponents that's willing to turn on the pipeline. So if you pull that off the table completely, well, now Putin's any threat to Putin's throne internally, they don't have any bargaining chips. So there's no alternative party that
You could also say that the threat to the economy would support the uprising against Putin. So damaging this pipeline would help the garner more opposition to him as well.
Yes, right now, basically Putin's choosing to cause problems for the Russian economy. And then now it's not a choice. It's just the pipeline's broken. Sorry.
Right. So Russia's initial response, by the way, was that they detected a pressure drop in the pipeline. Not to say that it was sabotage, only that there was a leak. If they had sabotaged it, what do you think is the possibility they would want to immediately misdirect and blame NATO rather than appearing to downplay it?
Well, that was my thought as to why it probably isn't Russia. So either way, it seems to be somebody's like false flagging, and it almost doesn't matter which side. But like, let's say Russia blew it up, and they wanted to false flag it as, oh, NATO blew up our pipeline. Well, wouldn't Russia then take that as the immediate reason to increase aggressions? I mean, this has been likened to, well, I don't like doing historical analysis like that, but it's been likened to previous events where there was some kind of false flag event, and then that immediately justified an increase in aggression and violence. And so I would have expected, if Russia was trying to false flag NATO, and the day after they're like, oh my gosh, NATO just blew up our pipeline, that justifies our use of nukes. That's what I would have expected. But basically after it happened, I think this happened on Tuesday or Wednesday, and Russia's just been like, well, not quiet per se, but quiet so far as their military activity.
Nothing new has happened. What they were planning on doing already did with it. Like, they're planning on annexing those regions of Ukraine. That was going to happen regardless. They didn't do anything different because of the pipeline.
Yes.
And the annexing of those regions were not justified by the pipeline bombing, which happened afterwards, I believe.
Yes, and on the flip side, if it was NATO or the U.S., or I repeat myself, who was trying to false flag Russia, well, let's say NATO blew it up, and they're saying, oh my gosh, Putin did it. Well, what did we see from NATO? We saw an immediate increase in aggression and rhetoric and build up of military surplus. We're about to pass another bill to give Ukraine even more aid money, and there's discussion about adding Ukraine just applied for NATO membership, which, based off the way the NATO treaty works, is anybody who's being attacked in the NATO alliance is an attack on one, it's an attack on all. So to accept Ukraine into NATO, who is currently at war, would be to de facto immediately for Europe and the U.S. to declare war on Russia. So there's been a somewhat responsive buildup from NATO that we didn't quite see from Russia. And again, yeah, I probably misspoke a little bit. It's not that Russia isn't being aggressive. It's just that they haven't changed their level of aggression. They haven't increased it at all.
This all happened very quickly. Ukraine formally signing the request to join NATO, which is going to require a response fairly soon, and then this pipeline being destroyed. And on the same day that a new pipeline, not from Germany, was opened up, saying, "Hey, you can't do this, but you can have this other option." The timing all is very strange.
Yeah, the other pipeline I'm talking about would be the Baltic pipe. Which do we know how? Like, what do they mean by open? I mean, one doesn't just simply like, oh, we put the last rivet in and now it works. Like, usually there's a lot of like testing period and like, is it open because they finished the testing period, or is it open because like they put the last rivet in?
I believe it was just the end of construction, not that it's currently pumping any fuel.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it might be weeks to months to years before that thing's actually pumping fuel, though I would imagine they're going to accelerate any testing that needs to be done on it.
Right. But it kind of goes along with the narrative of, hey, Ukraine is, you should support Ukraine because Russia's attacking the NATO, right? So this is pressure on NATO to accept Ukraine. You guys should buy fuel from this new pipeline because you don't have fuel coming from Russia anymore. You do what we've been asking you to do for a long time. It seems like all the influences are moving in the way that Western/U.S. national policy has been pushing it. Right? It's been a victory in every step of us getting what we wanted as far as foreign policy.
Is Europe and specifically Germany really going to be the fulcrum on the third World War? I mean, really, guys, like, really, like, again, are you kidding me, guys?
We've been over this.
Like, again. Oh my God. All right. You know what, Putin, just lay waste to Europe, please. Just, I think I would make America's future a lot better and world more secure if just Europe was just done.
Yeah. So Russia's response to this after the annexing of Ukraine of 4 regions of Ukraine, 50% of the country, Putin gave a speech. What's been referred to as unhinged speech, where he talked very little about Ukraine, which is now part of Ukraine, now part of Russia. And he mostly talked about how he and Russia are going to fight back against the Satanist West that wants to mutilate the genitals of children, which I guess, in retrospect, where's the lie? But yeah, they basically talked a lot about giving justification for war with America and the rest of the West.
And I think some rhetoric like that, and rhetoric that he's had over the last few years, where he's called out wokeness and stuff like that, stuff that's like particularly Western issues, like, and they're not facing some kind of like onslaught of wokeness in Russia. I mean, it's really irrelevant to him. But
that is just. Yeah,
he chooses to talk about it because it's something that he knows will create a schism in America. Yes. And he knows that the Democrats will continue to say, oh my gosh, he's using the same rhetoric that the MAGA supporters are. I mean, I would say that's probably his rhetoric this week was probably in direct response to the rhetoric that Joe has had with his Red, Fire, and Fury speech. And essentially what Putin would like to do is, because they clearly are not able to fight a conventional war, and I have my doubts that they would, even if they go to nukes, I don't believe they have a vehicle capable of delivering it intercontinentally anymore. Now, they supposedly do. I just don't believe that any of those vehicles work. I doubt that Russia would be able to deliver a nuke anywhere outside of the European continent. I really just don't think it. So what does he have left?
We haven't seen it tested yet.
What's that?
So they have, like, say, a strategic bomber. There's a new version of a bomber.
Yeah, but you're not getting a bomber all the way to the United States.
No, you don't have to. You just get it halfway and launch from there. So you've launched an ICBM from the plane. But does that we never
work?
See it tested.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it works. So what does Putin have left? Well, he's got psychological warfare in the hope that we will tear ourselves apart. So the best he can do is convince Joe and the Democrats, which is not very hard, to expend resources on rounding up people like Mike Lindell and probably us at some point, and declaring that half of America is a terrorist threat. So he's going to feed into that, whether it's going to be effective for him or not, but he's going to feed into it because that's the only card he's got to play.
So, I mean, I'm not going to assume that he can't, his nukes don't work, but whether or not they do or do not work, his strategy is the same. He wants to make us as weak as possible by having us fight ourselves. So he's taking things that he knows divide us, and he's saying those not because he is anti-woke, not because he's a good guy. He's a tyrant too, just like Biden and his ilk are tyrants. He's just saying what he knows will divide us so that we are weaker if we are in a conflict with them.
Yeah. And so again, where's the lie? But does he really mean it? Was he saying?
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't care if people are cutting people's dicks off. He really doesn't care. He just wants Joe to continue focusing inward and causing problems. That's their goal. We saw this because there was a bunch of argument all through the 2016 campaign and earlier, as well as, who's Russia's preferred candidate. Well, Russia's preferred candidate is chaos. That's all they really want. And that's all this really is. So, maybe they helped, maybe they hurt, but in general, they just want there to be distraction in America. And they're doing a pretty good job of it.
So Russia is accused of delaying. So previously, they justified why Russia is probably lying now by saying that they have delayed energy shipments in the past to Europe, delayed oil shipments to Europe in the past by blaming it on bad weather or broken equipment, stuff like that. And he did this, or Russia did this, to put pressure on NATO. Well, I'm sorry, but them delaying shipments in the past did not involve them destroying their infrastructure. It's not the same thing. Yes, they stopped some oil shipments to NATO because they said their ports were damaged by bad weather when they really weren't. That's not the same thing as blowing up your shipyard. So they've provided no proof.
So, I mean, can we take that to Pete Buttigieg? Is not being able to load your ports efficiently? Is that like now an act of war? My gosh.
Yeah, right.
Don't tell Buttigieg that.
So then that's the example of the reasoning they've been using to justify why the Putin blew up his own pipeline when they have no evidence, no sensor equipment has picked up Russian ships doing it. They haven't picked up Russian people doing it. They don't have any proof they can provide us. Just saying, oh, Putin's a liar, so he's probably lying now.
Well, I mean, Putin man bad. I mean,
Putin man bad,
right?
I mean, he is bad, but that doesn't prove that he did this to himself. And the thing is, it's a argument's razor, right? This is a big claim that he would blow up his own pipeline. It requires proof.
Yes. So who had the opportunity? So we went through possible motives. Who had the opportunity? Because you need means, motive, and opportunity. I don't know if we got to the means yet. Oh, we are going to get to the means. So means and opportunity. So most of NATO and Russia have access to the Baltic Sea, but the question is who has the ability to actually bomb the pipeline and with it a high likelihood of evading detection? Or who knew who would detect them but wouldn't report them? It is public knowledge. Dyer's stomping his feet right now. Public knowledge that the U.S. Navy Kearsarge Amphibious Readiness Group is positioned in the Baltic Sea. A Kearsarge is analogous to an armada or a what was the other one? A carrier group. So it's like more than a carrier group, but less than an armada. It does stuff in the water. So they are amphibious, which means that they have land and sea capabilities, which is what that word means. In case, you mean? Oh my gosh, Dyer. In case, those are two words, Dyer. In case the term amphibious readiness group didn't give it away, this is a fleet of specialized amphibious landing vehicles and capabilities. They have Navy divers, micro submarine operations, and employ special operators and special tactics and reconnaissance. The location of the leaks on the pipe are very important. All three leaks are at some of the closest points to NATO nations and the furthest points from Russia. These points are well within the naval control and surveillance range of NATO countries. And if you think that they're not surveilling the pipeline waters, you'd be wrong. If Russia were to pick a location to destroy the pipeline, this would be the worst location to pick. That location is also in shallow water, and that would be ideal for Navy dive teams or smaller unmanned subs to be placing explosives on the pipe. If
right.
That's what happened.
There is similar shallow areas closer to Russia that is not within the short distance of the shore of Poland and Sweden like these ones were. There's 4 different countries, all that their shores are very close to where these explosives went off near the pipeline. And the reason why we know right away when the explosions went off was because they were picked up by sensors at those countries.
Yeah, it was picked up by earthquake sensors, right? Seismology stations. And I think I want to clarify, it being blown up's not part of the conspiracy theory. I think everybody's saying it was blown up, right? Like both sides are saying it was blown up. Mainstream media is saying it was blown up. Like
everyone said it was blown up, including Russia. But Russia didn't know it first. Russia was the only one at the very beginning that wasn't aware of the explosions, and were only aware of a drop in pressure.
And as we know, who smelt it? They dealt it. So I just want to make sure that was clear that the explosion happened. It is known, or at least everybody's agreeing, that the cracks in the pipe were caused by an explosion. So to get an explosion down there, somebody has to get it there. So that's kind of why we're talking about, well, who has the ability to get an explosive onto the pipe in these locations. That's important. It's not, well, was there an explosion? Wasn't there an explosion? If there was an explosion, then who? It's not a layered conspiracy. It's just who had opportunity to get the explosives. Everybody agrees there was explosives. Nobody agrees on where they came from or how they got there. So that's want to make sure that was clear.
Yep.
All right.
So the Biden admin showed their hand, in my opinion. So earlier on this year, Biden threatened to end Nord Stream if Russia went to war with Ukraine.
Just for like kind of a quick history lesson, why did Biden have to threaten to end Nord Stream pipeline?
Because they were currently using it to sell fuel to Germany.
Yeah, but why was the Nord Stream pipeline started in the first place?
Oh, I forget why.
Because Biden started the Nord Stream pipeline after Trump.
Oh yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
He's the one that signed off on it.
Yeah. So there was no Nord Stream pipeline, and then Joe got into office, let it go through, and then now it's back. It's back to turning it off. Well, you never would have had to turn it off if you never turned it on there, buddy.
I believe that was just Nord Stream 2. That was the one that he signed off on. Yeah.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine.
So eloquent.
Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it. If Russia invades,
I promise you we'll be able to do it.
Yes. Fear into the hearts of nobody. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if... Yeah, I mean, I guess it's so weird, right? So like we spent like the first half of the show like, oh, like bumbling, fumbling Joe, he's got dementia, you can't believe anything he says, and then now it's like you have to take him really seriously when he says that we have by any means possible we can end this.
Well, if you don't believe him, what about Victoria Nuland?
I believe that she's evil, so I'll take her word for it. Let's see about that one.
Implementing sanctions on Nord Stream 2. As soon as you did, Nord Stream 2 declared bankruptcy and fired its employees. Now, in my judgment, Putin does not believe any promise from Joe Biden to maintain...
321?
What's that?
You're at 321?
No, I'm at 221, which is where the link jumped me to.
Oh.
But I can go to 321.
Yes, please.
I'll do my best.
Senator, I think Nord Stream 2 is now dead. And as you have said, it is a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea. I don't think it will ever be revived.
So you don't think it will? So let me reiterate my question. Should the sanctions be permanent as a matter of law, in your judgment?
I don't think it matters one way or the other. I think the pipeline will never come back.
So you're testifying you have no objections then, and state has no objections to Congress making the sanctions permanent?
That's enough.
We haven't looked.
I would say that she was wrong about it being a hunk of metal, although now it is again. So maybe she was ultimately right.
So she actually has multiple clips of her being questioned about Nord Stream 2 and giving similar responses, confident responses. No, this will never come back. So at that time, Cruz was interrogating her about this because he feared that Biden, who initially signed off on it and was kind of browbeat into opposing it, that he might end up taking sanctions off and allowing that Nord Stream 2 to be used again. So,
well,
definitely.
And remember at the time, which we talked about it extensively at the time, but one of the excuses given from the left and the moderates was, well, yes, this is a good thing for Putin to have the sanctions lifted on Nord Stream 2, but you have to give him something that you can take away, And that's how Joe Biden's going to conduct his diplomacy, is that now that he's given Putin this pipeline back, well, now he can hold it over Putin's head to make sure that Putin's not going to step out of line. He now has a thing that he can take away from Putin. Though it was unclear at the time, how would Joe take it back from Putin once he allowed the sanctions to be lifted? And, well, maybe everyone was right. Maybe the leftists were right. Maybe this was Joe Biden's way of taking his ball back that he let Putin borrow.
Yeah, possibly.
It's possible.
After the bombing of the pipeline, Blinken said afterward that the bombing of the pipeline was a huge opportunity.
Oh, wait. So tragedy happens. People are probably going to die as a result. And Democrats, well, this is such an opportunity.
Ultimately, this is also a tremendous opportunity. It's a tremendous opportunity to once and for all remove the dependence on Russian energy, and thus to take away from Vladimir Putin the weaponization of energy.
Wait, the dependence on Russian energy? Who's dependent on Russian energy? I distinctly remember being dependent on Russian energy was a joke that Trump was laughed at in the middle of the UN for bringing up. Nobody's, I mean, the idea that anyone's dependent on Russian energy is a literal joke. So funny.
Yeah, the German delegation were laughing at Trump, and now they're looking at the people dying.
Means of advancing his imperial designs. That's very significant, and that offers tremendous strategic opportunity for the years to come. But meanwhile, we're determined to do everything we possibly can to make sure that the consequences of all of this are not borne by citizens in our countries, or for that matter, around the world.
So, I want to foot stomp that it has been U.S. foreign policy for a long time to pressure Germany to not buy fuel from Russia, at least, and it's been the policy for the Democrats apparently for just since February, but it's been the policy for Republicans for years. But
I mean, that was Trump's one of his famous addresses to NATO was supposed to just be a casual breakfast, and Trump took over the breakfast. Nobody ate a thing. I'm sure they were very hungry after. But Trump berated Angela Merkel, for purchasing fuel from Russia as a NATO ally when there are other NATO allies, such as the U.S., that are ready and willing to sell them fuel. And instead of buying it from us, she's buying it from Russia, who is supposedly the enemy of NATO. And he said, that just doesn't make any sense. And Trump's kind of coming into this with, at that point, really only having 3 years of experience in, detailed foreign policy. I'm sure even, as a real estate mogul and TV star, he probably had a similar understanding to what NATO was actually doing that like any regular layperson did, which was to say not much. And so he jumps in it kind of from an ignorant, childish perspective and just goes, hey, as a child might look at something in a simplistic way and realize something that the adults in the room never would see, which is, hey, it doesn't really make sense that a NATO ally would be buying energy from the NATO enemy when there are other NATO allies that are willing to supply them with that energy. And it's kind of a simplified view of it. And that's kind of what you need sometimes. And for that, Trump was berated as being rude and representing, American idiocy abroad. And we had no respect from our peers. And how dare he say these things about NATO? NATO is such an important alliance. And how dare he say that it's a joke? And how dare he, talk about things that aren't green energy and all of this stuff. When the reality is that it makes perfect sense. And the reason why we know that it makes perfect sense is because now when it's becoming an issue, well, all of a sudden the Democrats have the same policy. It's really funny to watch when the screws really get put on, when the heat really gets turned up. Almost every time the Democrat policies will devolve into a Republican policy. You're starting to see that with crime. As the the experiment with Black Lives Matter crime enforcing caused a 60% jump in murder nationwide. Well, now all of a sudden you start seeing the Democrats adopting Republican talking points as far as crime goes. As you see issues at the border, as soon as the border issues started affecting Democrat cities, all of a sudden you started seeing them have the exact same rhetoric that the Republicans have. And then as Germany becomes deathly, to their absolute detriment, reliant on Russian energy, all of a sudden the Democrats start adopting Republican talking points. The reason why is because conservative Republican talking points reflect reality, whereas Democrat talking points typically only are able to exist in either situations where it doesn't matter or in fantasy land.
So bringing us back to the notes, and I agree with you, of course. What we've proven here is that the Biden administration, before the bombing of the pipeline, wanted the pipeline removed from the equation, and after it was bombed, their opinion is this benefits strongly the position of their foreign policy. So, a few other related points about Ukraine and Russia and the pipeline is. This week, the U.S. Embassy in Moscow has told U.S. citizens they need to leave the country immediately.
Wait, is this going to be 3 for 3 that we're going to have people evacuating the embassy with helicopters?
I think based on historical evidence, it will not go well if you try to evacuate the embassy.
I mean, geez, it was pretty bad the first one, and then I don't even know that we covered it. It was a few weeks ago. Was it Iran that we were doing that with too, where we had the helicopters evacuating the embassy in Iran, and then now it's going to be Moscow. I can't wait.
Yep. So look forward to that disaster. And then we have Russia on Thursday formally annexed 4 regions of Ukraine, or approximately 15% of the country. Now, just because they say they annexed it, because they declared victory after there was some referendum votes that were sham.
Yeah,
votes
it was a paper victory. It's like me handwriting a deed to Dyer's house and saying I own this now.
Exactly. So, and just because they say they now have annexed these territories, it didn't mean that they actually had military control of those territories, because they didn't.
Yeah, similar to I do not have military control of Dyer's house.
Yes. So that happened this week. Also, Russia said that they were willing to use any weapons at their disposal to defend Russian territory. And by that, they meant the new territory they just claimed. Because they are now claiming that attacks on those annexed territories is an attack on Russia.
Well, they better be careful, because Joe's going to shoot him with a hurricane like he did to DeSantis.
So this same week, Ukraine formally signed their petition to NATO. And should NATO accept them, as Fox said earlier, that would be NATO declaring war on Russia, because Russia is currently at war with Ukraine, and they have NATO has a defense pact. An attack on one is an attack on all, and all of them, according to Article 5, have to respond.
How is NATO? How do they vote on it? Do we have like a parliament or something where like there's like a representative, or is it like the actual military leaders of each country that are
each member state has a representative, but I think some representatives have a higher weight.
Well, I would hope that, since we're bankrolling 83% of the NATO budget and like 99% of the blood, I would hope that our vote is like the end-all vote. However, I would guess that if it comes to it, I'm going to guess the Democrats would want to include that, right? And my concern is that they're going to do this right before midterms. I mean, you have the Democrat Party right now is facing a complete rejection at midterms in 6 weeks, in 5 weeks even. And with 5 weeks left on the clock, they're essentially a lame duck party, and they are going to start World War III? Are you kidding me?
Well, if you are about to lose power, if you start a war, you have a good chance of staying in power, because people don't want to change leadership during a war.
I mean, let's be real blunt. Joe Biden's not going to survive for 6 more years. So I mean, if they start a war right now, I mean, he's going to be non-functional.
He's non-functional now.
I know he is, but he won't be able to ambulate. So, yeah, man. Well, don't underestimate the Democrats in what they will do to keep power, because they are modeled after every other authoritarian dictatorship in history, especially after the last 100 years. And I mean, as we've seen, their ideological forefathers were willing to do horrific things by any means necessary to maintain their power. So I guess don't be surprised. I just find it wild that with 5 weeks on the clock, they're going to start World War III.
So things are escalating fairly quickly.
They are escalating very quickly, right? I mean, it was a big escalation in February, where it was so bad that we had to use footage from video games and air shows, and then it was kind of just nothing for like 5 months, and just a lot of money being spent, and then now we're back to like war, nukes, blowing stuff up. It's very exciting. Can't wait.
Yes, I'm not going to go back into my historical compression theory, but in any case,
who do we think is going to fight in World War III? I mean, so like World War II. I mean, what was the death toll? I mean, it was in like the handful of millions, right? I mean, like 3 or 4 million people.
I think it was more than that.
What's that?
I think it's more than that. I'm double checking.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I don't know. Like, do you think that we're gonna get 1 million Americans that are like, yeah, I'm gonna die for Joe Biden's war? Like, yeah, I'm gonna die for the military-industrial complex and for Burisma to get a better gas deal with Europe. Like, I'm gonna die for that. I'm willing to die and fight in Europe because Russia and Trump is bad. Like, I mean, like, are we really like gonna be able to muster the kind of patriotic fervor which led to, I guess, just the unprecedented willingness to throw your life away from young men in previous world wars? And I'm just not seeing that happening. I don't know who's gonna fight this. It's gonna be drones and nukes.
So the estimation is between 70 and 85 million, but it's including civilian deaths, which still should be included. But in case you're wondering what military casualties were, so if honestly, I think that if there was a World War III, for some reason I have this weird feeling it's going to be Russia, Belarus, Germany, China, and some of the other Asian countries within China's sphere against the rest of NATO. Yeah, I think Germany's going to join Russia.
I mean, they might. You know what's wild, though, is so part of what I was just talking about, the 5 months of, status quo. Well, what happened at the beginning of those 5 months? Well, you had the initial Russian surge, and it seemed like for the first few weeks there, the surge was like, oh my gosh, like Russia is just kind of rolling about as fast as their cars will drive, as fast as their tanks will roll. They're making their way through Ukraine. And then Ukraine handed out AR-15s, AK-47s, and M16s to all of their civilians. And then Russia was stopped dead in their tracks.
It also had a lot to do with all the man pads and rockets we were giving them.
Yeah, but,
it almost feels like a strategy to bring in the Russian armor all the way to the core of Ukraine, just so that they have no way to run away from the anti-tank weapons.
I mean, that was Nancy's strategy, was just carpet bomb their column, right?
Yeah, so wouldn't that be a cynical strategy that willing to sacrifice a lot of civilians by letting the enemy move all the way up to your the core of your country, passing by and killing a lot of civilians, just so you could trap them and kill all their vehicles?
Do you think that China would be capable of doing a two-front war? Because I don't see any way that China is going to get into a war with Europe allied with Russia, and they're not also going to try to take Taiwan and other places on that side of the world. I mean, they would have to run it two fronts. I just don't know that they can.
Well, they currently are already exchanging pot shots with India. They have an interest in conquering India, and they also want Taiwan. So they have their own places they want to take. And if there's going to be a global conflict, that would be their opportunity to take there's the distraction. There's less likely they'll be stopped doing what they wanted to do.
I guess as kind of a consolation, unlike Japan, which had a lot of natural beauty, Beijing is, pretty much tapped resource-wise. They pretty much destroyed the land. And
it'd be nice if nature reclaimed it.
Well, I'm just saying that's not as big of a tragedy if we have to nuke Beijing as it was when we nuked Japan.
I think that if we nuked Beijing, it would actually help the environment.
It probably would. And I don't mean tragic from the human standpoint, obviously. I mean tragic from like a, nature and environmentalist perspective. Alrighty. Did we like sufficiently get ourselves onto some kind of like terror watch list for this segment?
I think we're on all the watch lists. Let's move on to the next story.
Next story then. I chose this picture, but I still love it. Alrighty. Well, Dyer, would it surprise you to learn that the Afghans that we evacuated from, well, I say evacuated, but that kind of implies that like it was intentional, right? The Afghans that Joe Biden imported illegally into America last year, after he collapsed their country, would it surprise you to learn that some of them are raping children?
Let me rephrase the question. Am I surprised that Afghans that commandeered a military aircraft and snuck into our country illegally to escape their crumbling country, am I surprised that they would not respect our laws and would hurt our people, and including raping our kids?
Yes,
I am not surprised by that at all. In fact, I predicted it when we did the story initially.
Well, then your surprise is it's met. The U.S. Attorney's Office in New Mexico announced last week that Star Mohammed Salab.
Sounds about right. I believe that name.
Is it Mohammed or Mahmoud? Okay. Mahmoud? I don't know. Jerk. He made an initial appearance in federal court on charges of coercion and enticement of a minor. He was, which I think is a very light charging.
Yeah, right.
He was confirmed to be one of the 88,000 Afghans evacuated during the chaotic U.S. pullout from Afghanistan last year.
I want to point out that before I go into explaining what he did, that the fact he was charged with coercion and enticement of a minor, not rape or sexual assault. Keep that in your mind. He's being charged with only coercion and enticement, meaning trying to convince a kid to have sex with him.
Well, I mean, Dyer, what is rape?
Well, let's talk about what is rape. So
it's what this guy did to a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah, it's what this guy did. This guy did to a 12-year-old. So Celeb is charged with approaching a 12-year-old boy at a park near a school. Always watch your kids at parks, by the way. In Las Cruces, New Mexico. He is said to have asked the boy personal questions before using a cell phone to show the victim photos and videos that were of sexual nature. That, by the way, is a crime in and of itself. And then inappropriately touching the boy. There you go. Sexual assault. So you giving lewd pictures and videos to a kid is itself a crime. And then
unless, of course, it's in a book about LGBT stuff and you're a teacher.
There is loopholes, apparently.
Yeah, the trans teacher loophole.
Yeah, he wasn't a trans teacher, though.
Oh, well, then he doesn't get the loophole.
Exactly. When the boy moved away, Celeb was accused of punching him in the face multiple times. That's assault. And for the 12-year-old, it could be attempted murder.
I believe
you have
that
an adult punching a 12-year-old in the face.
I believe that there's usually a like sexual aggression modifier if you're like beating somebody due to or related to trying to force yourself on them.
Or just a lesbian relationship.
Yes, also that.
So Celeb here is having a lesbian relationship with a boy. So the boy attempted to call 911. Was that too far? Did I find your line?
Oh, no, I mean, you haven't got to my part yet.
Okay, so attempted to call 911 and retreated into a bathroom stall. By the way, chasing after someone to assault them is another modifier, isn't it?
Yeah.
So he was followed by Shalab, who kissed the boy, sexual assault, and tried to put $20 in his hand and attempt to force him to touch him. So he tried giving the kid $20 and tried to get him to what's the word? Try to get him to suck him off.
Oh,
yeah. So he's trying to get the
Fellatio.
boy. Yeah, he's trying to get the boy to pleasure him for $20 forcibly. So this sounds like rape.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's women out there who get a look from a guy and say they've been raped. This kid has been punched in the face, touched inappropriately, and is having a guy trying to force him to give him fellatio.
This is expected, though. Why is this expected?
Why?
Well, most of the refugees that made it stateside were from the capital city from Afghanistan, which would be Kabul. The government of Afghanistan was primarily organized around the practice of bachabazi, or boy rape. This was, and I'm not kidding, that was mostly what the government was organized around. This is from the government that was primarily built during the 8 years of the Barack Biden administration. Enforcement of boy rape was carried out by people like Lloyd Austin and Mark Milley, who would have been part of the military leadership ordering the boots on the ground in Afghanistan to look the other way while Afghan security forces raped little boys on American military bases.
Oh, and also, if the servicemen try to do anything about it, they get sent to Leavenworth.
Yeah, I think didn't one of the soldiers like execute somebody who was raping a little boy, and then he's in Leavenworth right now.
Correct.
Yes,
I believe actually, did Trump actually pardon him?
I don't know, but he should have. But that is if you walk in on somebody who's raping a little boy, the correct response is to execute them.
Yes.
The Taliban, on the other hand, likes to rape little girls. So again, you had the Afghan government that was built by the U.S. the last 20 years. They liked raping little boys with bachabazi, and then last year the Taliban took over the country, and the key difference is the Taliban likes raping little girls. So the choice between raping little boys or raping little girls represents the primary ideological schism in Islam today, and it's an easy way to tell the two sides apart, which is why what happened here is completely expected. If Salab had instead tried to rape a little girl, I would have been very concerned about the Taliban having snuck operatives into the country inside the refugee population. But because it was a little boy that Salab tried to rape, I can rest easy at night knowing that the only pedophile rapists that were brought into America were the ones that were approved of and supported by people like Joe Biden and Lloyd Austin for the past 20 years. Gosh, I mean, it would have been really bad. It would have broken a lot of public trust if they
dodged a bullet there.
Yeah,
right?
if it was if we found out that the Taliban was sneaking little girl rapists in here, I mean that would have been just broken trust. But since it's the ones that Joe Biden and Lloyd Austin supported, I mean, doesn't that make you rest easier at night?
These are the good kind of child rapists that Biden and the admin supports.
Yeah, yeah, let's go with that. All right,
they're only importing the best.
Yes.
So this current reporting suggests that Salab was paroled into the United States in November of 2021 through the Philadelphia airport. The Philly airport was a major hub through which Afghan refugees were being trafficked into the country. Some of the flights that entered through Philly came from Qatar. Qatar was a staging area for the evacuation of the Afghan nationals. Qatar was also the place the infamous Reach 871 landed.
Reach 871 was a C-17 that had been, in my opinion, hijacked by some 640 Afghan civilians. The Air Force pilots of this bird made a unilateral decision to take off with their unvetted cargo rather than taxi to another area of the airport where the hijackers could be properly dealt with. Their decision to break several dozen Air Force regulations and standing orders was met with praise and commendations rather than dishonorable discharges. As I said, this plane would end up flying to Qatar, and Afghans that were staged in Qatar came in through the Philadelphia airport, which is the same place where Salab came through. Is it possible that Salab was on Reach 871? Is it possible that had the pilots of that C-17 done their duty, that pedophile rapist would not have been brought into this country to try to rape a little boy? Who knows? It's not like we were vetting any of the refugees anyways. It's not like the pilots cared who was on their plane. It's not like anybody kept track of any of that sort of stuff, because of course not. So who knows? It could have been, and it might as well have been.
Yes.
So, and so who knows? But these pilots, they got medals for bringing in 640 new Democrat voters into the country, and resettled in red areas. And if some of those new Democrat voters end up raping little boys, well, it's certainly not the fault of the pilots. It's actually racist of you for noticing.
Yes. So ICE released Shalab on parole at the airport from which he first entered the country that we are talking about is Philly Airport.
Nazi fags. How dare you?
Why would you do that?
Now we know why the FBI was told to stop investigating sexual crimes against children. My guess is that there is a lot more of this going on, and it's being institutionally ignored and/or covered up.
Thank you for the $10 and the very good point there, Triumvirate. Yes, I had not thought to link those stories together, but you are absolutely correct. As we reported last week, the FBI essentially ceased investigating child sex crimes and focused their resources on investigating January 6th adjacent, I don't want to call it crimes, but just January 6th existence.
Yep.
So, that could be why. That could be why.
Yep. So this, again, ICE paroled Shalab, like they paroled a lot of people, and brought him in through the Philly airport through a process.
You were describing earlier before the show about the difference between being paroled and what some of the other Afghan refugees have with U.S. citizenship. Do you want to go through that real quick?
Yeah. So the difference between parole and what most people would have is if you are someone who was intended to leave with the U.S. military, it meant you were a known person who was already vetted, who had documents, probably already had a legal presence in the country, they already knew you didn't have a criminal record. You probably were an interpreter who had already been background checked and all that, right? Now the parole process was someone who didn't have legal standing, who didn't have a green card, or wasn't a known person, who had come here basically as if you come across the border illegally. They hopped on the plane or were just brought on by choice onto the planes and brought to Qatar initially. These people, a lot of them didn't have any identification on them. They were unknown persons, and though they did the ICE and the Department of Homeland Security claimed to do a screening on them, the screening is only as effective as the records that they can use to present who they are. So if they have none, the screening is pointless. So the people who came here under parole were in the category of people who were not known persons, who did not have legal status in the United States, and who came here and were simply screened by doing a background check on if they had documents.
And even if they were pre-screened, it's important to note that, as I said before, bachabazi was a well-established practice for
not considered a crime.
Yes, for people in power in Afghanistan. So, I mean, you're not going, if you have high-level officials raping little boys and security forces raping little boys, nobody's going to report it. It's not going to be documented as a crime because it wasn't there. It wasn't something that was considered to be a problem or worthy of documenting. So none of that's going to show up in their reports.
Right, and if Shalab didn't even have an ID, didn't have a passport, what are they going to do to background check him? And also, the background checks were done extremely hastily over a few days, when background checks usually take months.
Yes.
So how thorough do you think the background check was? The point is, he came here essentially with no vetting process. Even though the Department of Homeland Security said, oh, there was a vetting process. When your vetting process includes checking a criminal record based on the documents they provide and nothing else, because the country they came from was collapsing and had no records they could get. I mean, for instance, Afghanistan was on the list of countries presented to Trump that could not reliably provide information that would constitute would be required for a background check. So when Trump initially said we should not accept people from these countries, it was based off a list that's produced during the Obama era presidency that said these countries cannot follow norms for background checks. They don't provide documents. They don't have records that are good enough to do a background check. I don't know if you remember that story.
Yeah.
So being as Islamic culture permits rape of children and women, and Afghanistan had a specific culture of raping little boys, you might say that anyone from there would present an inherent risk to the American people.
You might say that. Some people say
you might.
that.
I would say some people say that.
People say it. Operation Allies Welcome allowed DHS to erroneously use a process that was intended to be used on a limited case-by-case basis for individual humanitarian concerns over individual refugees. A process that was meant for individuals at a time was now being expanded to be used on tens of thousands at a time. By doing so, the Biden administration avoided the special immigrant visa SIV process and U.S. refugee admissions processes, both of which can take years to complete. DHS stated that they did screen each arrival, which may be true in a limited sense, but as no records or identification were available, most of the screening would have been useless. So probably what they did was like if you go to the airport, they just kind of like do like a quick X-ray scan of you, and they look at your ID, and then they let you on the plane. But what you're not seeing is that quick look of your ID is looking at a lot of deeper detail as to whether or not you're going to be allowed to get on that plane. And so for the Afghans, they're getting the quick body scan, and then nothing. There's no ID check.
No, it's a little more than that, Foxy. They got a body scan, and then they were allowed to get onto the plane with their child sex slave.
Oh yes, that's true too. So we also, slightly unrelated to the story, but related to the Afghan withdrawal, is like half of the refugees, quote unquote, that came over here, they're like 50 or 60-year-old men that were bringing their 12-year-old child brides with them, and U.S. Customs was like, "Oh, that's adorable. We'll give you guys a marriage certificate, no problem."
They actually were giving marriage certificates, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
so after Shalab's arrest, ICE put a detainer on him, doing their job partially, I guess, implying that they were expecting that if he was convicted, they planned to deport him. You know what? It's nice and all that ICE wants to deport him after he fucked a kid, but it would have been a little bit better, just a little better, if they hadn't let him in the country in the first place. Just saying. If they deport him to Afghanistan, it is likely that the little girl rapist currently occupying the country will put him into death for raping little boys. So it might be a death sentence.
Yes.
I'm okay with that.
Again, they're like the two sides there are like both of them are like very adamantly opposed to the other one. I mean, like Taliban thinks that like the worst crime is to rape little boys, even though they rape little girls. And the people who rape little boys, well, I mean, like, they had to get the U.S. to help them fight a revolution for the last 20 years to like throw the people that rape little girls out of power. So I mean, like they're really, it's really, it's like the Shiite and the other ones,
Sunni and Shiite.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that bad in Afghanistan. I mean, this is like, this gets down to the core of what does Islam mean. Did Muhammad say that you should be raping girls, or did Muhammad mean for you to be raping boys? I mean, it's going to take an austere religious scholar to really pick that apart, I think.
They have their own version of the Quran, each that justify the sexual assault of the different gender of child. The Bachabati guys, they think they're so opposed to having sex with little girls that they even are opposed to having sex with women. They only do it because they have to have kids that they can, have little boys that they can later rape.
Wow, it's awful.
Yeah, they're terrible.
It's almost like Islam's bad. All right, next story for YouTube.
There's another story. Look at that.
There's like a couple of stories. Okay,
this was story A1.
Yes. We just stopped attempting to number the stories. All right. Hurricane Ian. All right. Well, after we left last week, there was a hurricane that came out of nowhere, suspiciously. The Category 4 storm slammed into the coast of Florida with a 150-mile-an-hour wind. Dyer also put the kilometers per hour conversion in there. What you think just because, like, what the hell's wrong with you? Who the hell cares about metric system, Dyer? You are admonished, sir.
I am admonished. You need the button for that.
So 150 miles per hour, or 241 kph if you're Dyer, pushed a wall of storm surge water that had accumulated during its slow march over the Gulf. More than 1.1 million Florida homes and businesses were without electricity. And there have been 11 confirmed deaths, but the total numbers are unknowable at this time, and I believe that they are constantly changing at this point. The Democrats, of course, seeing human suffering and death and carnage, decided to blame it on climate change and their political adversaries. Here is CNN host Don Lemon. Well, we'll let you watch.
And what effect the climate?
Oh, I didn't want it to play yet. There we go.
Can you tell us what this is and what effect the climate change has on this phenomenon?
Well, we can come back and talk about climate change at a later time. I want to focus on the here and now. We think the rapid and
trying to get that. You said you want to talk about climate change, but what effect does climate change have on this phenomenon that is happening now? Because it seems these storms are intensifying. That's the question here.
I don't think you can link climate change to any one event. Okay. On the whole, on the cumulative, climate change may be making storms worse, but to link it to any one event, I would caution against that.
Okay. Well, listen, I grew up there, and these storms are intensifying. Something is causing them to intensify. Can you tell us what this is?
So Don Lemon talking to a NOAA scientist who is actually looking at the data and reporting to him about the data, and Don goes, yes, but my individual anecdote and gut feeling, are you sure that that's not correct? Are you sure that your reams of data from the last 100 years, are you sure that that's correct? Or are you positive that, my gut feeling and my personal observation and anecdote and just my feeling, are you sure that that's not are you sure that's not correct? I also want to point out a fun side story is I think it was on Wednesday, Crowder was, because they usually have like CNN playing on like a small window in the background just in case like something interesting happens live, and they pulled it up full screen this week. I think it was either Tuesday or Wednesday, and it was a CNN reporter on CNN Live, and they were like doing the thing where they were like struggling to stand up in the wind, but there was a tree and a signpost next to them, and they weren't being the tree and the signpost weren't moving. And it was hilarious. Yeah, I mean the level of gaslighting from CNN.
There's multiple clips of that too.
Yeah.
So hurricanes, they claimed, or at least Lemon and many Democrats have claimed that hurricanes are more common and that they are more severe. More truthful, but not completely truthful, left-wingers, actually with access to the data, have admitted that no, there actually hasn't been more hurricanes. In fact, there's a dip compared to the highest point of number of hurricanes.
There was like no landfalls last year, and this year was like no landfalls until this one.
Right. So there's been an actual
in Florida,
a recent drop in hurricanes. But we have a graph. If I'm not sure you pulled up the slide yet, that shows you that the number of hurricanes per year is on a regular varying cycle, and right now we're not
the
near the top
cycle. I recognize that chart. That's the sunspot cycle. It just also happens to be directly correlated to the hurricane cycle. Almost like now bear with me, Dara. I know this is a conspiracy theory. It's almost like the sun has some kind of activity that's related to global weather patterns.
Are you trying to imply that the giant nuclear fusion bomb in the sky has influences over our weather and heating?
No, I'm trying to imply that a vast array of high-energy antennas in Alaska called HAARP has an effect on hurricanes.
Are you implying that the source of all energy in the solar system might have some effect on our weather?
Yes.
That is a conspiracy theorist, and I admonish you.
Now, for those of you wondering, the sunspot cycle is about a 20 to 30 year pulse on the sun where it kind of oscillates between a little bit bigger and a little bit smaller. During that time, solar output energy-wise can fluctuate by as much as 1%. Now, 1% is not a lot, but when you're talking about the sun, that 1% is a lot. It's a lot. And it actually perfectly coincides. You can actually see there's a dip in the mid to early 80s in hurricane activity, and that was actually the last dip in solar output. And that was also coinciding with the time that the left was pretty adamant that we were about to head into a new ice age. There was even a bill in Congress debating whether or not we should be pouring ash onto the ice caps to try to melt them preemptively so as to not allow them to be a nucleation point for another global ice age. Followed by through the 2000s and the climate change hysteria, the solar output went through its regular cycle of increase. We saw global temperatures rise during that time, as is expected, and the number of hurricanes, which are dependent on ocean temperatures, rise, which is expected. And solar peak was sometime in the mid-20 teens, probably between 2010 and 2015. And as we can see on this graph, oh my gosh, it's almost like it's correlated or something. We see that the hurricanes are starting to stabilize and dip back down on their cycle. We're also seeing global temperatures stabilize, as the left would call it the Great Pause, and as the right would call it a great hoax. But what you're probably going to see over the next 10 years is you're probably going to see a dip in global temperatures once again, as per the previous solar cycles. It's very exciting.
Yes. So there was when I was on a previous deployment, the weather radar went down, and we have a guy his job is weather, and he supposed to give briefings to the aircrew before their missions about the weather conditions that they'd be flying into. And because he had no weather data, he gave a no shit briefing on solar weather. And as the aircrew were walking out, I sat in on it for fun. As the aircrew were walking out, they're like, "What the fuck am I supposed to do with that?"
I remember being on the phone with you when the weather guy came in, and you were mad at him because they were predicting snow they weren't predicting snow for Christmas where you were at, and you were mad at him that he has one job, and that's to make it snow on Christmas.
Yes. That's correct.
Like, do your job. I'm doing mine.
Anyway, so back to the claim that the hurricanes are more common. Not true. We have a graph. We have been keeping the data for over 150 years. And then as far as severity, records, a study, multiple studies, but particularly one recently, a study published in the scientific journal Nature Communications has concluded that a recent uptick in the number of named hurricanes, so not hurricanes, but named ones, in the Atlantic Ocean is not due to so-called climate change. The study instead concluded that any increase in hurricanes is more likely due to natural variability of weather patterns over time, as shown by the graph that is following the normal pattern of weather.
Well, and we also, it's only relatively recently in the last 50 years that we actually had satellite technology keeping an eye on those sorts of things. So I'm actually surprised that the overall hurricane rate is going down in general, just because it is possible for hurricanes to form and blow themselves out before they make it to land. And so we're able to much more easily identify whether or not they're actually maintaining their status as hurricanes and actually forming, even if they don't ever actually make it to land. And so I would expect, just because we're able to measure those out on the ocean in a way that we couldn't before, that they would go up, but they're still going down.
But they weren't, if they don't come near land, they're not given a name. Also, they found that the severity of those hurricanes has not been, if you take the average of all the hurricanes in the year, are not more severe. You might have more severe ones hit land on a given year. That doesn't mean that all the hurricanes that were generated were more severe, because there are other hurricanes that don't make land. In fact, the vast majority of hurricanes don't make land.
Yes. It's a conspiracy. Alrighty. Where are we at on this? I lost my spot.
We're at DeSantis request support.
Oh my goodness, we need to get going. All right, DeSantis requests support, and the Democrats mocked him. Wasn't that very nice,
And Florida, yeah.
And Floridians. That's not very nice.
Yes. So they were saying that, you support communism now, right? You were supposed to support socialism now. That you had a disaster, and now you're going to be asking for money. They were mocking Floridians, suggesting that receiving emergency support means that they are supporting socialism. That was one of the many mocks.
Yeah, and I can't remember. I know it was a couple of them. I know I saw a clip of a Democrat pundit stating specifically Floridian voters en masse that, maybe they need to consider if they want government help the next time they go to the voting booths. It's pretty wild. So the federal government sent 300 ambulances with medical teams and was ready to truck in about 3.7 million meals and 3.7 million liters of water once the storm passes. DeSantis requested a 100% federal refund of removal of storm debris for the next 60 days. So the way disasters normally work is the state's expected to pick up some of the tab. They usually get reimbursed to a certain percentage by the federal government and FEMA once it's determined, if it was what the state of the natural disaster was. And in some cases where the natural disaster is extra disastery, such as this one, it is possible, and there is precedent for a 100% reimbursement by the federal government. That way, Florida doesn't feel like they need to skimp on resource allocations, like they need to save money. This just allows Florida to kind of open up the floodgates for support and resources to make sure that we're getting the people out of there who need to be rescued and getting the stuff cleaned up and services reestablished as quickly and efficiently as possible without really taking money into account.
Plus, tax dollars are taken to put into a fund for this kind of thing that from all the states.
Correct.
So it is not like socialism. It is the federal government doing one of its basic responsibilities of protecting the people by providing support, mutual support for disaster.
Yeah, I mean, if the federal government is meant for anything, it's giga projects. Things like national defense is too big of a task for any one state to take on itself. Border security, too big a task for any one state to take on itself, and apparently too big for the federal government. Hurricane disasters, earthquakes, volcanoes, whatever, those are giga projects. They're too big for any one state to really be reasonably accepted to handle themselves. And that was kind of the point of the federal government and the union of states that would assist each other in such harsh times. That was kind of the idea of it. So this is not outside the realm of regular conservative thinking. This is kind of what the purpose of the union is to do this. The purpose of the union is not to do most of the stuff that it does. It would be to help out with storms like this.
So Joy Reid, Democrat Joy Reid, has mocked DeSantis in many different ways. One way, she mocked him for accepting or even requesting federal aid because she claimed, and you're probably going to hear this lie, this attack against DeSantis, that previously that DeSantis had voted against giving a bill that would give $9.7 billion to New York and New Jersey after Hurricane Sandy. This is not, he did not vote against this bill because he had a problem with supporting a Democrat state. DeSantis had voted yes on a disaster relief bill, just like that one, minus the pork, but the Democrats voted no. The Democrats then took that pork-free bill that would have just gave money for the emergency.
Completely standalone bill.
Yeah, standalone bill. And they added a bunch of pork, a bunch of money for non-emergency related things, just pet projects for that area. And then they took that pork-laden bill, and that's what DeSantis voted no on. He says no to spending money on things that were not related to the disaster. He said that I found an article where DeSantis was quoted saying that the bill, only 30% of the bill that he voted no on, went to disaster relief money over the next 2 years. He noted that the funding went mostly to things that were not emergency spending. So 7% of it was going to stuff that was not related to recovery from the emergency. The amount of aid that Florida will be requiring is not determined yet because they don't know the full damage. But one Democrat source estimated it at $70 billion. I have no way of knowing whether or not 70 billion is a realistic number or not. That's what they're estimating. However, so far, Florida has only asked for FEMA support, meaning the food, the water, the medical support, and 100% federal cost sharing for the removal of storm debris and damage. That's to say that they have not requested any funding, any cash for anything not related directly to emergency relief efforts. He's not requested any money for pet projects or building of a new thing or funding a new program. He has only requested money for removing debris and giving water and food and medical support to people who are in need. That's it.
Yeah. And, you get this kind of double standard as with all things, is that for the left, if, under Trump, under Bush, when you had blue states that were having disasters and requesting money, it was political if Trump and Bush didn't authorize every single penny and 20% more that these blue state governors wanted. You were killing people because they didn't vote for you. And then on the flip side, when you've got a blue president and you've got a red state with a disaster, well, aren't you the big hypocrite now? You shouldn't be asking for money. That's just hypocritical. Your voters really need to think about who they're voting for next time if they're going to be in a disaster-laden state. You really shouldn't be asking for money. So if you're a blue governor with a red president, you better get 120% of what you asked for, or it's political. And if you're a red governor with a blue president, well, if you ask for anything, that's political. So either way, red states get nothing, blue states get everything. That's just typical classic media Democrat spin. Not even surprised.
I do want to point out something with the difference in the possible cost of recovery. They're talking about $9.7 billion for New York and New Jersey. And yeah, sure, they had flooded subway stations. I'm not saying that there wasn't damage in New York, but Hurricane
flooded with
Sandy,
crime, maybe.
Hurricane Sandy, at its highest point, was a Cat 3, and it was only a Cat 1 when it made landfall in the U.S. So the damage that was received from a Category 1 hurricane, whereas the Hurricane Ian that just hit Florida, it's a Cat 4. Like the cost in damage is nowhere comparable.
And 4 cats is just a lot more cats than one.
I mean,
it's
one cat's hard to handle. They'll scratch you.
Yes, it's too
many cats.
Alrighty, so
we also have Kamala Harris suggested that hurricanes need to be defeated with races. And that's the video we were talking about earlier about suggesting that the funding be targeted towards. We'll let you listen to it.
It is our lowest income communities and our communities of color that are most impacted by these extreme conditions and impacted by issues that are not of their own making. And so
women.
Absolutely. And so we have to address this in a way that is...
So women, poor people, brown people, just like everybody but straight white men who are, let's be honest, the most likely to be having a fraternity party on the beaches of Miami, Florida. So I would say that they're very highly affected by this. I'm at least 2 out of 3 of those. I would say that this really, really hurts straight white men. So, I don't think that they should go unnoticed. I mean, maybe we need a fraternity frat party on the beach relief fund.
All joking aside, is it clearly a racist mindset that when there is a hurricane that affects everyone who lives in the area equally, it is not based on their skin color. The hurricane is not targeting people who are dark-skinned or are female. There's people of all types that are in need of help right now, and her mindset is, well, let's help the people that are in these key categories that we like more. Let's make sure we're helping them more. Because in her justification in the video is, well, historically, some people, they're not starting from the same point. Some people, they are starting off with more wealth. So they're, in her opinion, are in less need of being helped in a tragedy, an emergency like this, than someone right next to them that might have started off with less money.
And it's so strange. It's such a strange way to think about it, because it's just like it requires the assumption that society is atomistic, single individuals who do not have any kind of relationship and don't live with anybody. So like a lot of people are in interracial relationships, and like when they lose their house, they both lost their house.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are also in intersex relationships where they're married to a person who's a different sex than them. And so like a lot of women would also have, who lost their house, probably their husband also lost their house. Like, I mean, like at a certain point, it's like, okay, well, it's enough to look at the people who lost stuff, and they're the ones that need the support. It's not like, well, we need to find the black and brown people who didn't marry a white person and women who are not straight or white, and we'll go with them first. But if you're like a brown skin person who married a white guy, like if you're a brown woman and you married a white guy, well, like, I don't know, you're gonna have to go on the bottom of the list until we figure out what to do with you, because like, we can't possibly give that white guy another house. That'd just be wrong.
The only correct way of doing this, and the only correct way of thinking about it, is a program that is just giving to those who are in need and not considering. It's race blind, it's gender blind, it doesn't matter. Who lost their homes, help them. Who lost their businesses, help them. Doesn't matter what skin color they are. You know what? If you're helping out people in certain neighborhoods in Florida, most of them may be black, but you know what? The law shouldn't care. They're looking at people who are in need, not people who are in need and also are black.
Yes. So stick to foreign policy and making peace deals with Korea.
And at least she, we're mocking her now, but she did do one good thing.
Yeah.
She did, get peace with North Korea.
Yeah, that's correct. Do we want to play the rest of the clip?
No.
Okay. So, DeSantis also has warned that looters shall not be tolerated.
You shall not pass.
No. He will Balrog sword you. Okay. Let's hear what he has to say.
Not so much. The other thing that we're concerned about, particularly in those areas that were really hard hit, is we want to make sure we're maintaining law and order. Don't even think about looting. Don't even think about taking advantage of people in this vulnerable situation. And so local law enforcement is involved in monitoring that. I told Kevin if the state needs to help as well, because you can have people bringing boats into some of these islands and trying to ransack people's homes. I can tell you, in the state of Florida, you never know what may be lurking behind somebody's home. And I would not want to chance that if I were you, given that we're a Second Amendment state.
Yep. And there's a distinction in disasters like that. If you are trying to make your way out after a kind of like civilization disaster like that, where there's just for miles and miles and miles just destruction of society. If you happen upon a convenience store or a grocery store or a box store and they have some food or some supplies or water or whatever, I would say you're probably within your morality to grab that if that's what you need. Probably not in your morality to steal it from somebody, and you're probably not in your morality to go into somebody's house and steal their big screen TV. So just there's some things are permissible in disasters, some things are not.
Right. So Joy Reid also said that DeSantis is warning to looters to not loot and not victimize the people of Florida. She said it was like racist threats from segregationists, because she thinks that black people are looters. There's the tweet.
Oops.
Yeah. Oh, he's saying don't loot. That's an attack on black people. Wait a minute.
Oopsies.
She's a racist. She's an anti-black racist.
She is. All right. Well, and then we had some heroic news. There was when the environment presents challenges like this, it always presents opportunities for people to do heroic things. And the White House, in a press release, they thanked Loesch, a lieutenant commander, and Lieutenant Commander Christopher Hopper for their heroic work and their Coast Guard colleagues for what the work they performed during the search. And they also butchered this quote for readability. Basically, the White House thanked this Coast Guardsman and one of his buddies because they did such a good job going and rescuing people. Also, side note, the particular Coast Guardsman that Biden chose to honor is also facing dishonorable discharge for not getting vaccinated. Oof.
Ooh, oof.
Oof.
Yeah. I might have, if I was him, I might have just pushed him out of the plane.
Yeah. But the pandemic's over, guys. We found that out last week.
Yeah, so he's getting kicked out for no reason then.
Correct. Alrighty. So, our next story here is Martha's Vineyard update. More of a love story, if you ask me. So worse than any hurricane, Martha's Vineyard is still reeling in the aftermath of just 50 illegal immigrants being shipped to the island by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. In the time
they're so diverse now, though, right?
Yes. Well, not anymore. They moved them out. In the time since DeSantis subjected the Democrat enclave to such diversity, something like 150,000 illegal immigrants have crossed the southern border on average. Also during that time, the Democrats have been struggling with reasons, or they've been struggling to come up with reasons why it's not a problem to have 250,000 crossings per month in Texas and Arizona, but it is a problem to have just 50 crossings in Martha's Vineyard. Well, fear not, liberals. Nancy Pelosi is here to save the day, and she found the solution where both things can be true, where it's okay to have 250,000 across the border in the South, and 0 to cross the border in Martha's Vineyard. Let's listen to what is really, a philosophical titan of our generation.
Right now, the best thing that we can do for our economy is to have comprehensive immigration reform. We have a shortage of workers in our country, and you see even in Florida, some of the farmers and the growers saying, why are you shipping these immigrants up north? We need them to pick the crops down here. But that doesn't mean that we don't recognize our moral responsibility as well.
See, there you go, folks. It's not that illegal immigration is bad. It's just that there isn't any cotton fields in Martha's Vineyard for the immigrants to pick.
God,
See?
they're so blatantly racist.
It's all
they say
making sense now.
They think that this makes sense. They don't realize what they're saying is so fucking racist, and yet people still vote for them. I don't get it.
This is the progressive mantra. Now, mind you, back in the day, slavery was considered a progressive idea as well. There was a lot of attempts to kind of backwards engineer a science as to why it was okay to enslave a race of people. And there was a lot that went into, again, reverse engineering scientific reasoning, why their genetics were inferior, why their mental faculties were genetically linked to subservience, and why their bodies were able to tolerate the harsh conditions of slave labor much better than the white man. There was a lot of attempts, and that all came from progressivism. That was all progressives and trying to progress the science and understanding. Of
Even
human
when they were
beings.
losing the argument over whether or not they were human or not and whether or not they should be enslaved, they even would fall back on, well, it's in the best interest of the state that we have this labor because everyone depends on this labor. We need them to fight the fires for us so we save people's lives, so we can't release them from jail. We need them to work on our farms and our plantations because how will we feed our people? Our economy is dependent on slavery. If you take away slavery, our economy will collapse and people will die. Think about the slaves that would die without the food that they are producing with their slave labor.
Yep. And, it's very similar to how it was done in the past, where there was, again, this attempt to have a scientific rationale for why they were enslaved, but also it was moral, as Dyer just laid out. There was this argument that, well, they wouldn't be able to live on their own. They would die. They would starve to death. They wouldn't have these stable places to live and to work, and they would just devolve into degeneracy. So it's a moral aspect. It's not just scientific, it's moral too. And you see Nancy with the exact same idea as, well, it's basic economic science that we need illegal immigrants to go pick our cotton for us. But also it's not just that we need them to pick our cotton, that we also, it's moral. It's moral to have them pick the cotton, because if they weren't, God knows what they'd be doing otherwise. They'd probably starve to death.
Yep.
All right. Well,
they have always been and they will always be the party of slavery.
Yes, it's just reinventing
the slave is a little different now.
Yeah, it's slightly different color, slightly different crop, but kind of the same thing. Also, as somebody who is in the food industry, I can assure you that illegal immigrants in the supply chain is not economically beneficial anymore. That tends to cause picky suppliers and procurers to not choose you if you are unable to identify where your workers came from. That's a trend that's growing as well. And probably should not just be self-selecting. It's funny is that the free market has chosen to do that. But it would probably be more useful if there were some laws around that were actually enforced, so that the free market didn't just have to come up with that on its own. But evil capitalism has somehow self-selected that, well, companies that hire illegal immigrants are probably not the best ones to do business with. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. Well, our next story is a doozy. So, it's very, very tragic. The first openly trans Army officer has been charged with treason.
No.
Oh no.
Say it so.
Oh
no.
Oh my gosh. It's so unpredictable that this would have happened. Oh my gosh. No one could have possibly guessed.
Are you saying that someone who has mental instability and might be not trustworthy with their military secrets?
Yeah, somebody who's such a cult ideologue to a Marxist idea. Somehow they wouldn't be, I don't know, trustworthy with secure intelligence. That's weird.
I'm just so glad we spent the $200,000 on their transition, though.
Yeah, do we get the money back for that?
No, we don't.
Oh,
it's they get to keep it because
I feel like there should be like a rider on that you have to pay the money back if you commit treason. Oh God. Or worse, we should force you into surgery to put everything back. That'd be grotesque.
Wow, that is. I think that death would probably be a better option.
Well, that's why I think it's we should reserve that for treason. So basically this first trans Army officer. He tried. I think it's a he. Yeah, he tried to give U.S. military medical information to Russia in order to help in the war against Ukraine. But it wasn't Russians that he gave the data to. I believe it was the FBI.
Yes,
posing as Russians. And it's interesting. I wonder what medical information he was trying to give. Does it say it in the article? Because it's I don't know. Was he trying to tell Russia, hey, half the army's trans, don't worry about it?
So it was him and his wife, and they were working together, and it was collecting an individual identification health information that they thought that Russia might be able to use to exploit both the military and officials that are supporting the conflict in Ukraine. And my first thought when I was thinking of
blackmail about diseases, or like trying to like craft a bioweapon that would like broad spectrum?
I think it's both. So the only way I can think you could use someone's personal information if it's about something they have, then like, okay, they have a weak heart. We could possibly use something that could, take advantage
targeted
of
assassinations, perhaps.
Yeah, targeted assassinations. You could go as far, but I'm not sure if Russia is really capable at this point of doing viruses catered to an individual person.
I don't know that anyone's capable of that.
That's extremely like. I don't think.
We're probably still a few years away from that, but
there's theories you could do that, but I don't think that they would have something actionable now. And even when it is actionable, I don't think it's going to be Russia that's going to be doing it. So then
Fauci.
Yeah, so it had to be blackmail or using it for assassinations.
What about a white woman, Dyer? It's always blackmails. What about white women?
What? Oh, God.
So, Baltimore, Maryland, a federal grand jury has returned an indictment charging Anna Gabrielin, age 36, and a guy, and her husband.
No. That's the wife.
Wait, oh.
Henry is the husband.
Oh. So, okay. So, they've charged Anna Gabrielin, 36, and her husband, Jamie Lee Henry, age 39, both of Rockville, Maryland, with conspiracy and for the disclosure of individually identifiable health information related to their efforts against Russia, or related to their efforts to assist Russia in connection with the conflict in Ukraine. The indictment was returned on September 28th, 2022, and unsealed today upon the arrest of the defendants. I really want to know like what their motive was, because like I would assume that they would be like all in on Democrat policy, which would also necessitate them being like Russia hawks, and like any kind of like collusion with Russia is like a MAGA thing from their perspective. I'm really curious what their motivation was. It's very like ideologically confusing, although given the mental instability of this person, it's probably not surprising that they have incoherent thoughts in their head.
They actually explained their reasoning in my paragraph.
Well, I will just have to wait and find out then. According to the 8-count indictment, Gabrielin and Henry conspired to cause harm to the United States by providing confidential health information of Americans associated with the United States government and military to Russia. Specifically, the indictment alleges that beginning on August 17th, 2022, Gabrielin and Henry conspired to provide personally identifiable health information related to patients at Medical Institution 1 and at Fort Bragg to an individual they believed to be working with the Russian government in order to demonstrate the level of Gabrielin and Henry's access to health data of Americans. So this was like a hazing incident.
This was the first step. Yeah.
This was like to prove their loyalty. So they were like, yes, we want in, and we'll even do like a hazing thing just to like prove our loyalty to Russia. Their willingness to provide health information to the Russian government, and the potential for the Russian government to gain insights into the medical conditions of individuals associated with the United States government and military in order to exploit this information. My goodness.
Yes, they were caught when they attempted to meet with a Russian agent who was actually an FBI agent.
It was Chris Hansen.
Yeah.
Why don't you take a seat there? So why were you gonna come talk to this Russian agent? I swear. She told me she was 18.
No. They actually are like. They said they were older than 18, but they also said that they want classified documents.
Yes,
that's the problem. So Gabrielin told the DC that they had previously reached out to the Russian embassy by email and phone, offering Russia her and her husband's assistance. So they reached out to the Russian embassy, which, by the way, you have to know that those communications are being intercepted. Come on. How stupid are you?
Yeah, what on earth? I mean, are they also brain dead? I mean, gosh, how many like jeez, too much estrogen going in their brain. Good
Yeah.
God.
So Gabrielin told the UC that although Henry knew of Gabrielin's interactions with the Russian embassy, she never mentioned Henry's name to the Russian embassy. Gabrielin wanted to make sure that Henry could deny any knowledge of her actions. On August 17th, 2022, Gabrielin met with the UC at a hotel in Baltimore. During the meeting, Gabriel told the UC that she was motivated by patriotism towards Russia to provide any assistance she could to Russia, even if it meant being fired or going to jail.
Was she Russian?
Well, from her picture, she could be. She's white and black hair. I know. So yeah, there's not really much to go off of that. Didn't say whether she was Russian or not, but according to her, she is motivated by patriotism for Russia, and she was willing to be fired and go to jail for Russia, which is what happened. So good for her.
Yeah, but treason, traitors don't go to jail. They go to the gallows, which we need to bring back. I mean,
yes.
we really do. There's a reason why that was capital punishment. It was to, I don't know, assuage anyone else who thought that they might get a light sentence from doing the same thing, whether it's a little bit of treason or a lot of bit of treason. To the gallows with you.
North Korea would use an anti-aircraft gun. That's pretty flashy. So Henry is the first openly trans Army officer, or was stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina and held a secret level clearance. Yeah, not anymore though.
So was he like helping his wife then, and he was getting info too? Like they were both in on it?
They were both in on it, but because she was the only one talking to the Russian embassy / FBI agents, she was trying to claim that he was not involved at all, even though he was actually the source for the information. So that lie didn't make any sense in the beginning, right?
Yeah, but like I don't know, like how are you gonna be in a position like, I mean, he's an officer, and I mean, regardless of like what you think about if he should or should not have been, I mean, the Army just gave him a like extraordinarily extreme amount of consideration, allowing him to be the first trans officer, and he's just like, his wife's like, hey, like, I'm a foreign national and like I want you to commit treason for me, and he's just like, doy, like, yes honey, like let me do that right away. Like no respect for like what the country allowed you to do. Like really, like that's just like nuts.
Trevor said when he saw this story that I was going to be a federal agent arresting another federal agent.
I mean, it's a federal agent arresting an Army officer. I mean, they're both working for Russia. It's just, which version of Russia.
Yeah. So, this isn't the first story of a trans individual in the military, specifically the Army, that ended up being, working against our government.
Yeah, that's right. Bradley Manning was sentenced to 35 years in prison for leaking hundreds of thousands of classified documents. And unlike Snowden, he did not clean the documents for personally identifiable information of agents and operatives, and allowed a lot of troop movements to be released and our enemies to gain valuable intelligence about where things were positioned and what was going on. And that was juxtaposed with Snowden, who, for better or worse, whatever everybody wants to believe about him, is widely understood to have made a lot of attempt to cleanse the data of national security implicated information, merely having it be blowing the whistle that these things exist and they're being used against U.S. citizens, but not releasing information that was personally identifiable sources and methods, and not releasing troop movements or anything like that.
Right. But Bradley Manning, who took no efforts to protect people's information, he was pardoned by Obama, whereas Snowden is not pardoned.
Well, yeah, I mean, Obama was kind of pissed. He liked using those things, and then Snowden was like, "Ha, no," and then Obama was like, "Hey, man, come on, I wanted to spy on the American people, and use the IRS against them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So it's very sad.
Okay. So it seems like we have a bit of a trend with mentally unstable people being given security clearances and positions of power with which they can hurt our country.
Yeah, if you're
we're gonna learn nothing from this, right?
Army officer, there's like a, I don't know, like a 2 in 2 chance that you're like, I don't know, committing treason. You know, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying some people say that.
Well, there's probably more than 2 trans people in the military, but we'll never know. So that was our last story, wasn't it?
That was our last story. Very exciting.
Well, that was fun. Thank you guys. I'm a little depressed now. It looks like we're in World War III. Thanks, Fox.
Yeah, if we don't see you next week because the transatlantic fiber lines got cut and there is no more internet, you know, it was we thank you guys for.
Yes, this could be my last show. I appreciate all you guys. So, joking aside, is there, if this something does kick off, it's a very good possibility that if I'm not deployed, my guys will be, and I'll be having to deal with a lot of shit. So, watch the news. If something obvious happens, the show might not happen because of me, but Fox will still do it, I'm sure.
Yes, so long as I have internet and skin that was not burned off by the nukes.
They won't nuke you first. I mean, they'll get to you eventually, but
yeah, probably. Yeah, as long as I'm not like, I don't know, in the trenches
irradiated
with my rifle, you know, I'll probably still be streaming. I do have a phone, so like if there's like internet, I'll probably like stream from my phone or something. But we will, you know, we'll keep it going. I'll keep it going. We'll give you guys updates as to, you know, whether or not Dyer is still here. I'm sure that'll be fun.
Thanks. All right, we'll see you guys next weekend, maybe.
Stay safe, guys. Should be signing off. Gosh, yeah, it makes me wonder. Maybe we should start changing this to like a survival prepper channel. Would that be more useful for our audience than talking about Lizzo twerking?
So you're saying I shouldn't do a mock survival bag where I pull out a ridiculous number of items from it.
Also, items that were not useful for survival.
Right. That was also the joke.
All right, guys. See y'all next week. I'll be an optimist, and I'll say we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
See ya.